Welcome to Extraordinary Creatives. I'm Kerry Hand, 35 years as a gallerist, curator and institutional director, now coaching artists and creative leaders to build creative lives that reward them. 2 episodes a week on audio and video, an honest conversation with an extraordinary creative about their work and their life, and a shorter deep dive into the mindset and strategy questions creative people actually face. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. I was looking at an artist proposal recently for a really significant exhibition, and it was one of those proposals where you can immediately see that the artist has really thought about the opportunity. They haven't just taken some existing work and thought, right, where can I shove this? They've responded to the place. They're thinking about how people might move through it. There are new works, things happening outside, possible collaborations and performances, maybe some ideas around public engagement. You can feel their excitement about what the project might become. And I was excited by it too, because I've spent so many years on the other side of these proposals, working in galleries and institutions, and actually having to get exhibitions and programmes made. I found myself reading it in 2 slightly different ways. One part of me was thinking, my God, this could be fantastic. And the other part of me was thinking, bloody hell, this is a lot of hard work. Not because the artist had necessarily proposed too much, because some projects need to be big and sprawling and complicated. It was more that I could see how much activity was sitting underneath these lovely ideas and how easily some of that activity could end up belonging to the artist without anybody ever really deciding that it did. I see this quite a lot with ambitious creative people. You get an exciting opportunity and of course you want to show what you can do with it. I get it. Somebody gives you a room and you start imagining the whole building. Then you discover there's a garden. Your brain's already halfway down the garden. Somebody mentions a local organisation and suddenly you can see a collaboration and you're best friends with the name Pete, who wants to help you make it happen. One idea leads to another because that's what you're good at. Before long, you've offered the moon on a stick. And I don't want you to stop doing that, actually. I'd much rather see an artist begin with an exciting vision than produce something timid because they're already worrying about the budget. There'll be plenty of time for reality to enter the room. I think you need that first moment where you allow yourself to see what the project could be. The bit I'm interested in and want to share with you is thinking about what happens afterwards. Because everybody has become excited about the possibility, you have to begin separating the artistic idea from all the work required to make that idea happen. Say you've imagined that a particular part of an exhibition might involve a theatre company. You might know exactly why that would be an exciting idea artistically. You might even know the company that you'd love to work with. But there's quite a journey between having that idea and there being a performance in the gallery on a Saturday night. Somebody's going to have to develop that relationship properly. There'll be conversations about what the theatre company might contribute, what they might need from the project. There are fees, schedules, rehearsals, technical requirements, and perhaps you should be involved with some of that. And of course you should if it affects the concept, the work, the ideas. But do you need to produce the entire thing? Possibly not. That's where I think we sometimes blur 2 quite different roles. Having the artistic idea doesn't necessarily mean you're the person who has to provide all the infrastructure around it. And I know how easy it is for that to happen because I've sat on different sides of these conversations throughout my career. I've made work myself, I've run a gallery of commissioned artists, I've worked inside large cultural institutions and been responsible for programmes where there are tons of moving parts. And one of the things you learn very quickly inside an institution is just how many people have to be involved in making something that to the visitor looks wonderfully simple. There's a whole world underneath the surface of a project. Somebody knows what you can and can't do to the building. Somebody's thinking about access. Somebody has the relationship with the local authority or the community partner. Somebody knows why that object can't go through that particular door, although everybody was absolutely convinced that it could. And actually, one of the simplest places to start thinking about this is in the way you write a proposal. I notice artists quite innocently writing things like, I will organise a programme of performances, or I'll connect with local groups. And I know what they're doing. They're painting the picture. They want the person reading it to understand how rich the project could become. The difficulty is that 6 months later, I will organise can come back to you as well. You said you were going to organise it. Now, it's amazing how quickly a speculative idea becomes a line on somebody's production schedule. So I think there's a lovely bit of space you can create in the language. You can say that the work opens up the possibility of collaborating with a theatre company, and that you'd like to explore how that might be developed with the institution. You can talk about the potential for a public programme and what might emerge through conversations with local partners. You're still giving them the full imaginative picture. You're also acknowledging that you don't yet know exactly what form it will take because you haven't had all the conversations yet, and it would be rude to do all of that work without the institution on board. They might want to take part of that process by the reins and do it themselves. So it's true that you probably don't know. So they may know somebody that you don't know. There may be a producer there with fantastic relationships. There may be an access issue you couldn't possibly have anticipated. There may be funding available for one strand of the project, and the institution might have spent 10 years building a relationship with a community that you were about to approach with a very cheerful email on a Thursday morning. That's partly why you're working with them. And I think this is where the conversation gets much more interesting for me, because once you stop assuming that you have to arrive with every answer, you can start finding out what the other people involved can and will actually bring, which is hopefully time, attention, and money. And there's something I do before that meeting, particularly if you've written one of those wonderfully expansive proposals. I'd sit down with it again when you're not in proposal writing, getting it over the line mode. You're not trying to impress anybody. You're just looking at the project for yourself, trying to find the beating heart of it. So if circumstances changed and you couldn't do every single thing you've imagined, what would you be genuinely devastated to lose? Which parts contain the thing that you're actually trying to investigate or communicate or make visible? I sometimes find this more useful than asking, what could you cut? Because what can I cut immediately puts you into this rather miserable scarcity mindset. Whereas if I want to know what you love most, if I was thinking about what you love most, what I love most, if there were 3 things that you could make incredibly well together, which 3 would make you think, yep, that's still your project, that's a project that I want to back? Because then that gives you something to take into the conversation, because real projects do change, of course they do. You find out that something costs twice as much as everyone thought. A collaborator can't do the dates, the space behaves differently when you actually get into it. The wall has some mysterious heritage status that nobody mentioned in the first meeting. So if you understand the heart of the work, you can respond to those things with feeling less afraid that every change is a diminishment. And then when you sit down with the institution, I think you can have a much richer conversation about what's actually possible. Now, obviously, you need to understand the money. I'd want to know what the artist fee is and what the production budget is. And I'd want those to be clear rather than discovering later that your fee is expected to absorb half the things you thought were production costs. But I'd be equally interested in the people. Who's actually going to be alongside you whilst you make this? If you've imagined a substantial public programme, is there somebody there who produces that kind of work? If there are complicated partnerships, does the organisation already have relationships that could help? If you're making something technically difficult, what expertise exists in-house and what would need to be brought in? If they don't have experience of that kind of thing, they're going to be asking you a ton of questions all the way through the process, because not knowing creates anxiety in humans. And then I think there's a whole other conversation that artists sometimes forget to have, because everybody becomes so focused on getting to the opening. What is this institution able to do for the work once it exists? I've seen artists pour an enormous amount into an exhibition, make something genuinely important for their practice, and then discover afterwards there's hardly any decent photographs of it, or there's no writing, or nobody really thought about who ought to be invited to see it because everybody was so busy getting the final thing installed. And that's the other thing about having something with too many moving parts. You risk that happening. For me, that's an important part of the planning, is that if you over egg the pudding, and don't get me wrong, I've done it a million times myself, and anyone who's worked with me is going to be listening, bloody hell, Kerry, can you remember that time when you did that thing that got 9 billion moving parts to it and expected us all to deliver it and get a press review? I know, I'm sorry. To every single one of you, I'm so sorry. I know I've been guilty of it. But if you're going to spend a year of your life making something, I want the life of that project to be longer than the exhibition dates. Perhaps the organisation has relationships with curators who should see it. Maybe there's a conversation to be had about acquisition. Perhaps there are other places where part of the work could write about it, or the work could travel. So if you get somebody, for example, who could write about the work that is exciting for you and for the institution, that's going to help you all understand what you're doing differently. So it's not just like an add-on. It's like for the curator, for the institution, for the marketing team, for the legacy of the project, for the website, having an incredible bit of writing about the work, the project, what it means to culture, can really shift things for everybody. So please don't just think of these things as an afterthought, but also don't make it hard for yourself by having too many moving parts, because for the love of God, get good photographs. If you want to come out of a major project with something more than the relief of having survived it, you really want to have moved your practice somewhere. And there are people who now know the work who didn't know it before. You've got material that allows you to communicate what you made. New relationships have begun. Maybe opportunities emerge immediately, maybe they don't. But the work has acquired a life beyond that particular building. So none of this means walking into the gallery with a clipboard demanding to know what they're going to do for your career. I really want to stress that because I know how stretched institutions are. I know because I've worked inside them, but I also know what it's like when there isn't enough money and there aren't enough people and everyone is still trying incredibly hard to make something excellent. So often the artist is excited, the curator's excited, the producer's excited, and the project grows because everybody can see how good it could be. Nobody has sinister intentions. It's just that sometimes that excitement can create work faster than it creates resources. And at some point, somebody has to notice that. And sometimes the answer will be that the organisation simply can't support every element. That's useful information. It means you can work out together where the available money and energy and support will make the biggest difference to you both. What I don't want is for the gap between the project everybody wants and the resources actually available to be quietly filled by your labour. That's the invisible bit. And if you're listening to this having already sent a proposal where you've promised the moon on a stick, don't panic. Please don't start retracting things. The proposal has done something useful. It's shown them the world that you can imagine. The next meeting is where you begin to find out which version of that world you can actually build together. So if you go in and say, I'm really excited about where this could go. I've been thinking about which parts feel absolutely central to the work, and I'd love to understand how you're seeing the project developing from here. How does it make sense to you? How are you going to make the most of this project as an institution? Then let the conversation happen. You might discover that something you assumed would be your responsibility is absolutely something they'd expect to produce. You might discover the opposite. You might realise that an idea needs another funding application before anyone can commit to it. You might find that one strand of the project is taking a huge amount of resource without really serving the work or you in the long term. All of that is useful to know. And I suppose the deeper thing underneath this is that I don't think ambitious artists need to demonstrate their ambition by showing everybody how much they're prepared to carry. You've already demonstrated your ambition in the work. You've shown them the size of your imagination. Now let the institution show you the size of its commitment. Commitment doesn't only mean money. It can mean expertise, time, relationships, advocacy, production support, access to audiences, the care somebody takes over documenting the work. Different organisations have different things to offer, and part of a good collaboration is discovering what those things are. But please don't assume that you're desperate to get the thing over the line and therefore you should do all the things, because that's a quick road to burnout. So perhaps before your next meeting about an exhibition or a commission, please go back and read what you've proposed. I'm not looking for things to remove necessarily, but just notice where you've accidentally volunteered yourself for jobs that may not actually need to be done or need to be yours. Find the bit of the project that you care about so much that you want to protect it whatever happens next. And then go into the conversation genuinely curious about what the people on the other side of the table can bring to making it possible. Because I don't want you making smaller work as a result of listening to this. Quite the opposite. I want you to make the really difficult thing, the unreasonable thing, the thing that requires other people's knowledge and skills and resources and relationships because you couldn't possibly do it all yourself. That surely is one of the great possibilities of working with an institution in the first place. So think about one project you're developing at the moment. Maybe it's still just a conversation. Maybe there's already a proposal sitting in someone's inbox. Have another look at it. You know what you're bringing. Now find out what becomes possible when they bring something too. If you found this useful, don't forget to subscribe at kerryhand.com/subscribe. I'll send you the text versions of these episodes straight to your inbox every Friday so you can come back to these ideas, prompts and practical advice whenever you need them. Thanks for listening and being here. See you next week. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something in this episode landed for you, please share it with one person who needs to hear it. Come and find me on Instagram at kerryhand, that's CERIHAND, and join thousands of creatives reading my weekly newsletter at kerryhand.com/subscribe for practical advice you can use this week straight to your inbox every Friday. Until then, keep making the work that only you can make.